I'm Molly Thomas outside the Munk Debate in Toronto. These semi-annual forums bring together some of the brightest and most controversial thinkers on the planet. And this one, as you can see, maybe one of the most controversial that there is. Throngs of protesters, hundreds and hundreds of people are here to protest Steve Bannon. He is the alt-right American political strategist known for inflammatory rhetoric and really fueling Donald Trump's rise to power. His harshest critics accuse him of propagating values of neo-Nazism, of propagating values around white supremacy, and inciting hate towards religious and racial minorities across the U.S. So, does Steve Bannon belong in Canada? Are we just giving him a platform, or is this actually about free speech? The resolution at hand tonight, be it resolved, the future of Western politics is populist, not liberal. Steve Bannon will argue for, and David Frum will take against.
Bannon may be despicable. You may like him or not like him. That's up to people, but you've got a very smart guy debating him. If this was Steve Bannon on his own, absolutely protesting. But if you want to quiet voices like Bannon, put very smart, rational people up against him and quiet their voices.
The white supremacists are not welcome here. Steve Bannon is not welcome. Anyone who's attending this event is not welcome.
I don't think that somebody who preaches hatred and white supremacy should be allowed to speak here. It's like, you know, they have to draw the line. I believe in free speech for sure, but it helps to legitimize certain kind of hatred.
Despite the very heavy police presence, you can see the police horses are out. You can see the yellow jackets all the way down there. The front door completely manned by police officers. There is a large line of people that still want to be at this Munk Debate. It is completely sold out. People outside, a lot of Canadians not happy about this debate going on tonight. Do you understand that concern? Were you talking to people before you got here?
Yeah, and I actually told them that I agree with most of what they have to say. But I also believe in free speech, and I think Steve Bannon's ideas will not shine in the light of day. They'll shine in the darkness of the interweb and sort of the dark places where I think creepy people like him hide out.
We've had some protests outside of the hall tonight. We were expecting that. It was anticipated. So it's taking us a little bit longer than expected to seat all of the 2,800 people who've showed up tonight to hear this important debate on the future of populism in the Western world.
How is this one different? Because everyone's talking about it.
Yeah, you know, this is great. This is the dialogue of democracy. We're not about, changing people's opinions. We're about presenting both sides of an issue and having trust, having faith that people can come to their own reasoned views. Whether that changes their mind at the end of tonight about populism, that's kind of beside the point. It's more that we're having the debate.
President Bush, David's...
If she does not stop, she will unfortunately be asked to leave this debate. So, Madame, it is your decision. You can stay or you can go.
Liberal democracy is stronger than it looks because human kindness and decency are stronger than they look. The cruel always think the kind are weak. But they're going to discover that loyalty and patriotism, these are tremendous resources, and they are going to begin to be felt more and more.
The future obviously belongs to populism. It's only going to be defined by, is it left-wing populism or conservative and right-wing populism? Is it about deconstructing the administrative state and opening up the power of capitalism? Or is it going to be about more state intervention? Thank you very much for having us tonight.
Vancouver is often rated one of the best places to live in the world. There are no hurricanes here, no tornadoes rip through the city's suburbs. In an era of climate change, Vancouver, even Canada, has been dubbed a haven from the worst of what's to come. The same things that make Vancouver an attractive place to live also make it wildly expensive. Land is at a premium here. And that's put farmers on a collision course with developers, begging the question, in a hotter, more crowded future, how will the city feed itself? Once known as Vancouver's breadbasket, the island municipality of Richmond has evolved into one of the fastest growing residential suburbs in the metro area. Where there was once farmland, New homes, some as big as 11,000 square feet, now line nearby Number 2 Road. It's become a hot-button issue across the city.
My heart broke the first house that was built on Number 2 Road, and it's been breaking ever since. They built the dike in 1907.
Farmer Harold Steeves has been tracking the issue of development for nearly 50 years on Richmond City Council.
It was unbelievable. People just said, we just got to stop this, and that's why we had a change in Richmond Council. People just said, enough is enough. We just can't take that anymore.
Pressure to build new housing is intense. It's projected that 4.3 million will live here by 2050, a 60% increase in a population already reeling under a housing crisis.
Yeah.
All the more reason, says Steeves, to save farmland. Could you just tell us about what makes the soil so special here?
The soil here is alluvial soil, probably hundreds of years of grasses and marsh grasses growing in the land as the tides went in and out, adding humus and nourishment to the soil. So this becomes what we call Class 1 soil, the best soil in Canada.
I guess when a lot of people think of soil, they think it's something you can just make in your backyard with some compost and some hay or something like that. Is this really a renewable resource?
There used to be a saying that it takes 1,000 years to make an inch of soil, and I think that's about correct as far as nature is concerned. Only 1.1% of British Columbia is arable enough to grow small fruit and vegetables. That's not very much. You've got to save what you've got.
The Fraser Valley is our local food basin, and it is the most amazing soil we could ever ask for. Which animal doesn't protect their food source? It's insanity.
Every year we hear Vancouver in the top 10, one of the most livable places on Earth. People are going to be coming here in droves over the next 30 years. What does that mean for farmers like you?
The more people come here, the more we have to hang on to the land around the urban centers to allow us to continue to grow food.
These farmers are especially vulnerable because they don't own the land they work on, leasing it year to year.
A lot of what we do, our planning and our soil management, happens for next year. Investing money and time into planting a cover crop, all of the kinds of things that you do for good soil management, if you don't know that you have the lease next year, it's really risky. We hear from the local fishermen, the sea level's rising. It's not a theory, we do see that on the ground and it impacts us. So it's not just the rising sea level, it's not just the changing temperatures, it's the uncertainty of what's going to happen.
People don't believe us when we say the climate is changing, but we've seen it changing here for at least a decade quite dramatically. If the climate's going to warm up, if we're going to have drought in the American Southwest and in California, and we predicted all of that 30, 40 years ago, then we've got to save the agricultural lands that we have. We can't depend upon other countries to feed us if they're going to be set with drought and a changing climate.
Every Saturday during the growing season, Kimi and Kareno set up a farm stand here in town.
All right, you guys, go for it.
This is so nice.
Customers come rain or shine to pick up fresh, local produce.
All right, let's load it up here.
But people are worried about what will happen to farmers squeezed between creeping development and rising seas.
I think we're at a turning point, and I think if people don't step up and say something, we're going to regret it. If we don't start protecting our farmlands and helping our farmers, we're going to regret it in a very big way. Very, very big way.
The farmers say the issue cuts deeper than a debate over development and speaks to the growing disconnect between people and the land.
When you have a relationship with land and you see how much we share it with so many beings and how many people we feed, then to think of us not having it or not fighting for it is emotional. There's no getting it back when it's paved over. This is land that is living soil. So, it's living, and we need to treat it like a living organism. And it needs to have rights.
I'm Silas Brown, and today I'm in Halifax, Nova Scotia, talking to a young Ugandan woman who wants to make a difference and become a leader in her new community.
I'm Neria Atwine, second-year student at St. Mary's University. I'm originally from Uganda. I'm just here to study. My mom encouraged me to come to Canada because she was like, if you graduate, the opportunities there are abundant. I love leadership. I love the youth. I love being a millennial. I love being a part of a group that has different insights on certain issues that are affecting our society today, and just being a part of it is more, gives me the, the thrill. I'm one of the representatives at I Matter, so recently we developed a resolution and a report card that, highlights climate action progress and their plan. We came before the council meeting, the council, and presented our resolution on what HRM still needs to do to improve, the environment quality, air quality, and more or less just pinpointing their weaknesses, but also their strength in terms of, trying to protect HRM, because HRM is quite vulnerable to, climate action extremes. We are the future leaders of tomorrow. We're the ones who are going to face the consequences of the policies that are being set today.
I'm Ifeanyi Emesih, and I'm in Halifax. The World Economic Forum has sparked a global conversation among young immigrants on a local level who are looking to make a change. Today, I'm going to be talking to some of these individuals about Canada's role in the world, and from their perspective, how they think the world sees Canada.
I would say, well, right now Canada, obviously in the last couple of years, has been focused on like the reconciliation part with Indigenous people. And I think with where we're at in the world right now, for Canada to be a leading voice on reconciliation with their own people, I think could be a good example for countries like the United States.
Yeah, that's a good thought. What do you think?
I think Canada has a unique opportunity to put some focus, perhaps reaffirm some of our climate change goals. So I think that is a golden opportunity for us.
Being an international person, I came from India, and I decided to stay here, and that's why I'm working here. So being an international person, I see there's like a unique situation in this country compared to many other countries, which is that the diversity.
Yeah.
And I think that can be leveraged in different ways.
With a lot of people starting to, question U.S. dominance, Canada has an opportunity to take a different approach.
Yeah.
You see with the U.S. pulling away from some of the multilateral kind of structures that have been there and going with the U.S. first approach. Canada could, take the different approach and decide, we are going to band together as nations, working together with other countries, other industrialized nations, to address some of these issues like the migration crisis, refugee crisis, and much bigger issues such as environmental issues and things like that.
Can Canada promote international human rights and maintain trade partnership with countries where these issues are a thing of concern?
Yes, but again, it goes back to if we are going to take that role on an international stage to promote human rights, we need to make sure that we're covering all our bases in Canada.
Okay. When you say covering all our bases, what do you mean exactly?
The reconciliation part.
Okay.
I think that humanitarian efforts, personally, I see it being very much a part of who Canada is or what Canada is. I think across the world, I think I'm right in saying, people have this perception that Canadians are the nicest people around.
Yeah. Yes.
Right? So I'd like to think that it is very much of who we are as a people, no matter where you come from. But it's got to be an incredibly difficult conversation to have, especially looking at trade agreements. There's so much money at stake, so much at stake for people, for suppliers, for people who are buying. But we must not forget what makes us Canadian, and I think being humanitarian is part of that.
Yeah.
Is it going to be an extremely difficult conversation to have at the higher level? Yes. But if it were easy, it would have been done long ago, right? So I think, yes, it needs to be a part of how we look at our trade agreements with other countries.
Yeah. So are you alluding to the fact that if we don't agree with a country about their humanitarian activities, we shouldn't engage in trade?
Not necessarily. I think it's not as simple and cut and dry as that. I think context matters.
I think one of the challenges that faces Canada as well with human rights in the way that they're made universal is a lot of the pushback that comes from some of the cultural context in which human rights are, upheld, because it doesn't always work as very black and white to say that this is a human rights violation and therefore, such and such should be treated as such and such.
Definitely a cultural context.
There's a cultural context that needs to be understood, and that makes, any sort of diplomatic relations very challenging, because to say on one hand Canada can look the other way and continue their trade on the economic side of things, but socially and politically, they are up in arms with these so-called human rights violations. How do you marry the two areas, right? It's quite tricky.
How can Canada stay globally competitive?
So I think when you have, an ambitious goal of getting immigrants into this country, you need to set up programs that will reach out to them, that will get them engaged, actively engaged, not just sitting in a classroom and learning, but being in social innovation labs, being around peers of all different races, backgrounds, and throwing problems at them that they can sort of think about within the context of Canada. That's something that, if you're worried about immigrants coming to the country and not partaking in the economy, I think innovation labs like that that bring people together can definitely fuel growth, economic growth.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
It's important also to understand that, as he was saying, the more people that tend to come in, there's a need for supports. There should be these support mechanisms, and I don't mean just the financial side or the services that are provided to newly landed immigrants, the ISANs and such. I mean something much deeper than that. Networks of young people who might have been previously established in the city can help others to adjust and acclimatize, and you exchange notes, that kind of thing, where someone you can relate to.
Lately, I think what a lot of people are realizing is that we are at the turn of the fourth industrial revolution, where we have access to technologies that we didn't before, and we will have access to technologies that we cannot possibly imagine right now. So I think programs like that can really aid in Canada's overall progress to remain competitive in that respect. We'll look at communications, for instance. How does Canada compare in terms of the cost of internet and how accessible that is, even in rural areas, as well as the more populated areas, compared to other countries with a similar population density, like perhaps we have? I think maybe that sort of information could give us a better answer, but I would still consider, your regular internet and phone plans is quite expensive when compared to, I do have quite a lot of family in India, and when they tell me about the deals they have on communication deals, it's way cheaper and they get a lot more for their money. And I'm sure, there are different systems, different places, different populations, but I think there are places where we can improve.
My final question is, now within the G20 and outside of the G20, how do you think the world and other countries view Canada?
I have a one-word answer to that. I think hopeful.
Hopeful?
Yeah, because I think a lot of countries know what our neighbors are going through. And I think a few of them are probably looking to us and watching us closely to see what is our response now.
And how we can lead in a positive light.
Right. Do we emulate them or do we stand apart?
I'd say one word would be primed, and I mean primed that Canada's ready for a big move. So they've been pushed onto the stage. Someone has.
So the spotlight.
They're on the spotlight. Now is the time for them to assert themselves globally, to kind of shed maybe this humanitarian leadership role that they've had for so long. That's no longer at the forefront of what's going on. I think it's time.
In my mind, say if I take a helicopter view of, maybe not a helicopter view, maybe from the space, maybe from the moon, and if I look at Canada, I would see Canada as someone or like a place which is a leader. So our way of leading could be more like, we are like kind of like nudgers, that we do things in a certain way, and we are promoting like multiculturalism and then leveraging skills of refugees or like immigrants to expand our economy. And then show the rest of the world that how it is done.
I think Canada is seen as a safe zone, right, and a happy place from the rest of the world looking in. And as we open up our doors for more immigrants to come, you know, we can't get comfortable with that reputation of being a safe zone. We also need to double down and make sure that everyone's taken care of and that, you know, we don't have to deal with, you know, the rise of populism.
The work's not over.
There you go. Far from it.
I'm Rhiannon Russell, and I'm in Whitehorse, where a diverse group of potential municipal candidates is getting a politics lesson.
My name is Véronique Iri, and I'm the co-founder of Equal Voice Yukon and the organizer of tonight's event, So You Want to Run for Office. So we have a municipal election coming up throughout the Yukon. Next year there'll be a federal election, and then 2021 when we have a territorial election. That's going to come really quick. So we wanted to host an event to provide resources and stories and inspiration for women who might want to put their names forward for any of these elections, or who are looking for ways to volunteer, or for male allies who want to know how they can support women in politics, whether or not that's through taking up issues, volunteering, or supporting candidates. So we brought some women together, and we created some resources packs for people looking to run, and we had an event where people just shared their stories.
Having thrown my name in and doing all the campaigning, my career, even after being Commissioner of Yukon, knowing many people, I found going door to door, not many people did know me. So I kept wondering, how do you touch people? How do you get to be known?
Well, my mom's a politician. She's on city council. She also ran territorially. So politics are pretty big in my life. And I'm really interested in events that are aimed towards women, because I find it's very important to give women a voice and a role in the community, and it's just something I feel very strongly about.
I'm standing here today because of all of these teachers, the elders, the leaders in our community of the Yukon who've taught me and are my role models.
So what we want to do is encourage women and non-binary folk to put their names forward so that their voices are heard and represented in the political arena. So we're hoping to keep the gender parity we currently have on the Whitehorse Municipal Council for the upcoming election.
Hi, I'm Anne Lang, and we're at the Evergreen Brickworks in Toronto. Hundreds of people have come to an event here to discuss the future of reconciliation in Canada, and among them is a group of Indigenous artists who are challenging the way we view that issue.
The elders knew that the Great Spirit would reward the just cause. The ancient ritual, Kahawagano, loosely translated to Iroquois mud wrestling, was fought. There's a group of 7 artists who were invited to be a part of this Walrus Talk Live, and they asked us to come in and animate the space. And of course, as Indigenous people, we're invited often to do these kinds of things, and we're asked to do a very specific kind of performance, traditional. And so we were like, oh, we have to do this traditional thing that we all come from different nations, like Mohawk and Dene and Cree and Métis, and we were told to think about reconciliation. So we just wanted to create something that was addressing that, really addressing how you put together all of these artists and expect to have 15 minutes of a performance in the end, and traditionally, or not traditionally, but often people want to see traditional Indigenous stuff, very serious ceremony. So we gave it. We created this very serious ceremony.
We are serious about reconciliation. We are here to struggle with you for it. Reconciliation doesn't just happen. It's not easy. You don't just sit there, you fight for it. You get messy about it. Now, who's going to join me? Nope. You.
We had about 6 hours, to come up with a 15-minute piece that speaks to reconciliation in some way. That's impossible. I'm telling you, that cannot be done. So we're sitting around the table, and Sherry Miracle says, hey, I got an idea. What if we do Iroquois mud wrestling? And it sat there on the table for about 5 seconds. And then everyone just went, yeah, that, right? Because it was in terms of spectacle, we could not do better than Iroquois mud wrestling.
Thank you for fighting for reconciliation with me.
I certainly wasn't planning on participating so immediately, but when they started pouring things into that pool, I was like, what is happening? We both kind of got dirty, and I think that's part of the story too, is that it gets getting dirty. It gets sort of getting close to people. It gets to be about touching people and joining in and like making yourself vulnerable and taking off your assumptions and expectations about what's going to happen.
Can we get some cocktail napkin for...
I'm Jen Gersten in Calgary, where old resentments are causing some to revisit an age-old question.
I can remember the exact moment I became a separatist, and that was in 1980 during the National Energy Policy.
This is Bob Lafergie. Here on his bucolic farm just outside Calgary, he carries a list of grievances piled sky-high.
When was the last time anybody in the province ever had a say in a federal election? It's always over by the time you get there. The seats as well were pretty much gerrymandered, and you have your equalization formulas, your all-out attack by environmental groups that are infiltrating every level of government in a direct attack against Alberta.
Here in Alberta's largest city, this journalist turned politician turned journalist has heard it all before. Danielle Smith hosts a daily radio call-in show on News Talk 770.
Until we get the federal government out of business, I think what we need to do is have the provinces need to run autonomously, run our own business, get rid of this transfer payment scheme that is the same as a welfare scheme.
403-974-8255. Stay with us. We're talking Western separation, but also Western alienation. What's behind it? What do we do to fix it? Stay with us on 770 CHQR. All he wants is a little bit of appreciation. Yeah. Why do they hate us so much? Why don't they just appreciate what they do? Why don't they realize that we work hard for what we have? Because I think everything is rooted in you've got more than we do, therefore we're going to take it from you so we can redistribute it to something else.
So yes, there is anger in Alberta today, but the question now is whether or not this long simmering public resentment can actually coalesce into a viable political movement. Even its advocates are pretty skeptical.
Getting on the ground and talking to people directly, you get sympathy at the door, but it was like, I really understand where you're going, I support you, but I won't vote for you. When it actually comes to a vote, people do not want to go. It's no coincidence when we've seen whether it was the 80s with the first Trudeau or in the 90s with Chrétien and nowadays with Trudeau Part 2, these cycles come whenever there's a Liberal government in, and Canada's a two-party system essentially. We'll get a Conservative government maybe in 4 years, maybe 6, maybe 2, who knows, but things will calm down a bit at that point too. Even if nothing else will change, that's some of the frustration with the real separatists. It doesn't matter which government's in, they're not going to put Alberta on the top of the priority list, but it'll be eased, that's for sure. The pipeline will help, but there's a number of other issues, so we'll see.
There's the illusion of what Canada is versus the reality of what Canada is, and that illusion is very, very strong for a lot of people. Like one old-time separatist told me, he says, we're not so much separatists as realists.